Hello, hello, hello. I am Rakaba18. Today I'm bringing another in-depth guide on an operator in Rainbow Six Extraction. Today we're going to be talking about Lion. Lion is one of the easiest operators to use in terms of his ult and his utility. He is an intelligence gathering and movement detection utility operator. He's primarily best used in order to give your team information. His ult is incredibly easy to use. We'll talk about some of that in the in-game footage, but there are a lot of things to get to with him, and we'll get right into it. But before we go there, I want to make sure that you've subscribed to the YouTube channel here, that you're liking these videos and commenting below if you enjoy what you see. Please let me know what you think, and who should I do an in-depth guide on next? I've had a couple of requests, and we've got those coming soon, so thank you so much for those. Also, I want to make sure that you guys know that I am live on Twitch Monday through Thursday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time every single day. We do in-depth Maelstrom tips, we do challenge events and community games. I play with viewers. It's a lot of fun. And then as new events come out, I also talk about those here on the YouTube channel. So let's get right into it here with Mr. Lion. He is a very, very good utility operator. One of the best things that I can tell you about him right out of the gates is that he's essentially an XR drone with a few exceptions. So the XR drone, which is a tech, we'll get into pieces of technology here and the grenades and gadgets and stuff later, but for the most part, he is essentially his scan will detect any enemy movement within range. Cooldowns are a factor here, but basically you just kind of need to know that he detects any kind of movement. And so the main difference between him and, like, let's say an XR drone or him and Pulse is that with Pulse you'll get information about nests. With Lion you're going to get information about enemy movement, which will show you most of where enemies are unless they're standing still. Very important point there. But it will not give you information about nests. Whereas, like, let's say, for example, the XR drone is going to give you information about any kind of enemy, whether they're moving, whether it's a nest, whether it's a blinding spore, whatever. So there are ways in which this overlaps with the XR drone, but it doesn't quite do the exact same thing. And so keep that in mind as we talk about this advancement and progression. So the EE1 drone, as I said, detects all enemy movement, can be used again after a short cooldown. So it does refresh itself. You don't need to use the refresh boxes. At level 2, you get a detection range increase to 25 meters. It does not say what the base duration or meters are, but that's a big upgrade to the range in which it will detect movement. The arsenal update at level 3 is huge because it's of HK 417 is one of my favorite guns in the game, one that I use quite frequently. And by the way, he has some of the best guns in the game overall, so keep that in mind as we walk through this. At level 4 here, we have a speed increase of 25%. As I've said in some of my other videos, these are really important buffs. They will help you move much faster. We'll talk about whether he's faster or slower or takes more damage than the average operator here in just a minute. At level 5, you get a really important boost. If you revive, you'll gain an additional 30 health. He, among other operators, revives with some of the most health in the entire game, so really important upgrade there. At level 6, he gets the SG shotgun. I don't really use shotguns myself, but we'll talk about that here in a second. At level 7, you get a recharge reduction, meaning it will essentially last longer, up to 30 seconds, and the cooldown is reduced to 50 seconds. So you get less time, less downtime, and it lasts longer, so you'll be able to gain more information for your team. At level 8, you get a really important reduction to your damage taken by 30%. And then at 9, you get the F2 assault rifle, which is a good gun, but one that I don't personally use very much. And we'll talk about that why in just a minute. At level 10, you get a really important update here. Cooldown reduced to 40 seconds, and then enemies become scanned when they're detected, which essentially means that they will be permanently scanned for your team. So the up until this point, they do not become scanned. You just temporarily see their movement. When the scan goes away or the drone goes away, you don't see it. So this is one of the ways in which level 10 operator is going to make a huge difference for you versus level, like, let's say 6. Or like 7. So it does make a huge difference, and just keep that in mind as you're choosing whether or not to use this operator in a Maelstrom. He is easy to bring to a Maelstrom. He's just not going to bring his entire kit until level 10. And in fact, I would say he's probably one of the safest operators to bring in prior to max level into some of the endgame content, just because the intelligence is helpful. And as we'll talk about here in just a second, it allows you to not have to bring a recon drone or any kind of like scan drone. And it also limits your need for more intelligence gathering operators like Pulse or IQ. So, all right, let's talk about his guns. The V308 is a fantastic gun. It is a fast firing, essentially, I think it's an AR, but it has a 50 round drum, and it kind of packs a punch for the size of the gun. Has pretty decent fire rate, and the recoil is pretty easy to control. I use a 3x scope, no, 2.5x scope, the vert grip, the compensator, and yeah, it's probably one of the better guns in the game in terms of like just packing a punch. You really don't even need to hold down or mag dump here. You can just kind of, take it. It packs such a punch that most things are going to get, emptied by the end of 2 or 3 rounds. So, pretty good first solid option there. And in most mobile situations in which you're rushing around and trying to gather as much intel as you possibly can for an aggressive team style, this is a really good option for you. The other option is if you're more of a backline support intelligence gatherer and you try to play a little bit more like passively and quietly, but you need to do a lot of damage in a short amount of time. The HK417 is one of your better options. I use a 3x scope, muzzle brake, and vert grip. You definitely, especially on an HK, because of the primary reason you're using an HK, for example, or any of the other marksman rifles, is you don't really want to put a suppressor on it, because if you're using this gun, the main reason you're using it is for the damage. So watch what happens when we go from 69 damage to 41. And at that point, you're being quiet, but you might as well just bring a different gun, candidly. Because the main reason you're using this one is to put high damage in a short amount of time and practice your trigger finger. This one also has a little bit of a higher skill cap than, say, like the V308. It's a little harder to use in rush situations, and you can get in a little bit of danger with it if you're rushed by a ton of them at the same time, or you're by yourself doing solo content. This one can be a little bit tougher to use, but it is a great gun. I don't use shotguns very much, so I don't really have much to comment on this other than it is a shotgun and I don't really like it. This one is the F2. This is a good fast firing rifle, but especially as it relates to it does less damage than the V308. And it has a fire rate that's higher, but it also has a smaller clip. So you're going to be, and a much higher recoil pattern. So you're going to be dumping mags much quicker. You're going to be doing a little bit less damage per shot. And I just think it's a good option. It's a decent gun. And if you like it, you like it. But my personal preference is if you're going to go with a semi-auto or an auto pistol or rifle, go with this one. The V308 is probably your better bet. All right, let's talk about a secondary. So the Magnum here, one of the important things to remember with this is you cannot silence it. So it's a really good high damage option. 78 damage is a ton of damage for a single shot. But as you can see in the recoil pattern there, it is really hard to control. So you want to use this as just a quick alternative to, like, let's say the HK, or if you're using the V308 as your fast option, this can pack quite a punch to it. It does have a nasty recoil pattern, though. So don't want to use it in a pinch necessarily if you're being surrounded. Just use it if your other guns are empty and you need to pump a ton of damage in a hurry. The option that I tend to go with as a quiet option is the P9. Damage isn't as much of a concern here. It doesn't do a ton of damage, but the recoil pattern's easier. It's a good solid, secondary silence option. One that's not going to really make or break your team, but I tend to go with the silenced option as my secondary, as a personal preference. But again, that's up to you and what you prefer as an operator. So let's talk about this. One of the biggest mistakes that I see people make, let's say you have the recon drone and you haven't unlocked the XR recon drone. You don't really need this. Bringing a recon drone with Lion is sort of like, I have some vanilla ice cream in the fridge, but I'm going to make a special trip to the gas station that's 50 miles away, and we're going to get vanilla ice cream there. In the exact same brand, the one in the fridge isn't expired, it's brand new. But I go to the grocery store or the gas station that's a while away, and I'm like, you know what? I want some more vanilla ice cream. It's sort of like you already got it. You don't need to bring you don't need to bring utility that you already have. And this essentially equates to your entire team. If you're bringing Lion, you don't need a recon drone. You really don't. You're kind of overlapping too much, and the amount of information that you're going to gather from a recon drone versus not having it you're essentially taking up a utility slot that you don't need to. So if you're bringing Lion, don't bring a drone. Now, I will say that with the recon drone versus Lion, you're going to get information about nests, and you're going to get information about blinding spores, etc. But don't worry too much about that. Is the value of learning that there is a nest over there versus like a freed up slot like a belt or a utility kit is going to be substantial. So just again, that's a really easy mistake I see a lot of people make. Don't do it. Don't need to bring a recon drone there. So as a intelligence gathering operator, Lion does free up your operators to bring other things so that everybody can bring a revive kit, everybody can bring explosive belts, and you get the intel anyway. So I tend to run him with a revive kit and paralysis grenades. But we'll talk about, as always, that's a personal preference, depends on your team build and how you're playing, what you're doing, all that stuff. We'll counter into that. So there's not a whole lot more to say about his loadout. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of this in-game footage and talk about his utility in-game. All right. Here we are in game with a max level Lion. As always, this is a level 10 operator guide. I just happened to prestige Lion here to level 10. And by the way, his entire prestige outfit at 10 is pretty sick. But that's another story for another day. Let's talk about his ability. But before we get into that, I want to go through, this is basically his P9. As I mentioned in the menu, this is the gun I use as a silence option. If you like going loud, and if your skill level is a little bit higher and you can manage going loud without alerting the entire map, the other revolver secondary is a good option, but this is his only silenced secondary, so I tend to use it. That fits my playstyle, tends to be what I prefer. And then for the main gun, I tend to go in various situations where I'm running around. Keep in mind, too, that Vigil is a little bit slower than the average operator. Or not Vigil, excuse me. I just filmed the other Vigil video, so I was a little bit tricked on that one, but this is Lion. My apologies. The thing with Lion is he's a little bit slower, and he's going to take about the same damage, about average level damage. So you want to pick a play style with him for the most part. And with all these operators, candidly, if you're playing in a run and gun style and you're moving around the map pretty quickly, the V308 makes a good option. But the HK also does a lot of damage, and that's more of a backlined operator, defender, information gatherer style. Just depends on how you play and what you want to do. But I'm using the V308 here. As you can see, it shoots pretty loud, and it does pack quite a punch. It's a great first option. So here's this guy. Let's get him out of here. So the one thing that you want to keep in mind, as I mentioned in the menu walkthrough there, is that Lion sort of replaces an XR drone or any kind of intelligence gathering gadget or grenade. You want to make sure that you're not doubling up on that in order to free your team up to use other gadgets, other grenades, other things throughout the game. You also don't really want to pair him with other intelligence gatherers like IQ necessarily, or with Pulse, because you're stacking your team with utility that is necessary and important. Information is important in this game, among the most important things, but it's not going to give you enough information to warrant having two operators like Lion and Pulse in the same team, because you're only going to get information. You're going to get all the information, but it's going to require more operator space. There's only spots for 3 operators. There's only spots for 1 gadget per operator. So keep that in mind. Lion tends to just replace. It's a hard replacement for XR drones. One of the biggest mistakes and the easiest mistakes to avoid with Lion is simply not pairing him with anything that would gather intelligence. The main reason you're bringing Lion most of the time into your team, particularly in Maelstrom, is to gather intel, and that intel gathering utility will free you up to bring revive kits, grenade belts, etc. So let's talk about his ability. It's very simple. One of the easiest, probably the easiest utility alt in the entire game. Simply hit the alt button, and he will start to scan at max level. The range is longer, the cooldown is less, and it lasts longer. In addition, it will also scan enemies as long as the ability is up, and then temporarily after that, any scan that occurs will disappear. So as you can see, there's a Tormentor. Now, here's the important thing to remember with this ability. The scan is a limited range, so as you can see, it goes out in a circle, and you can kind of see the wave as a demonstration of that, but it is connected to movement. So if an enemy is standing still, it will not scan them. It is only when they move, and that is why blinding spores are not part of that. Any kind of boxes or utility that IQ would spot are not part of that. The additional part of that is that nests are not part of that intel. So you want to keep that in mind, that if you're bringing intel gathering, you're going to need to remember not to howl nests, etc. So let's talk about a few things with Lion here that are a little bit more advanced. The one thing that you can remember, if you were played through the Nightmare Fog event that just recently ended at the timing of this video, what Lion brought to the table was essentially that you could see through the hallucinations, and I would anticipate as crisis events continue, you're going to start to be able to see that operators like Lion will be able to, like, you know, if there's a hallucination and your contamination level is high, or in a different application of that through a crisis event, you're going to get to see through those. And so that kind of intel was sort of niche and temporary, but you're going to see it as we progress and there are more updates to this game. One other thing to keep in mind with Lion here before we show you what this looks like in real time. Let's go ahead and kill these guys. So as you can see, we have howled here, but we can see any kind of movement that comes towards us, and we can take them down, and that will provide that information to your team as well. Now, one important, very, very important note here as it relates to mutations in Lion is that his cloak, or his detection, will find cloaked Archaeans. Meaning, if the mutation is cloaked Archaeans, it will find them. But you have to be relatively close to them in order for that to happen. So, like, if I'm standing here and there's an enemy like right over here, it's really kind of inconsistent as to how well it will detect them. If you get a little bit closer, it's going to find them. I don't know how much of that is intended necessarily versus like a little bit of a bug or some sort of issue with the game's coding. I'm not sure exactly. It's hard to say, and it's a little bit inconsistent. But it is important to remember that they do, the scan does detect cloaked Archaeans. The one thing you want to remember too, though, is that if you're on a cloaked Archaean mission and it's the mutation, just make sure to balance gathering the information versus being too close to the enemy so that they howl. That's the sort of trade-off with it, and one of the only things to keep in mind with his ability. One of the biggest mistakes that I often see, unfortunately, with people that use Lion is that they don't use the scan at all, which is very odd since it's so easy to use, and it provides a very, very important and necessary utility in the game, but it's one that I just see people not use, candidly. The number of times I've queued up with Maelstrom randoms and they just don't scan is wild. So just keep in mind you need to use the ability in order to maximize his potential, but again, he is one of the easiest operators to master. That's pretty much all there is to talk about with Lion, so let's go ahead and head on out and extract here. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like the video and to comment below what do you think. Who should I do a review on or an in-depth guide on next? And also make sure to check out my live Twitch channel at Merkaba18, Monday through Thursday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I am putting a link to more videos down below so that you can check out other guides. Make sure to check those out and let me know what you think. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for watching.